report.
Being 5:15, I'd like to call the Thursday, May 23rd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Looking for a motion to up the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Susie, seconded by Donna. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. For a motion for the approval of March 28, 2024 Planning Commission minutes as read in your packet.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Motion's been made by Susie, seconded by Jay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carried. Need a consideration for a front yard fence request for 1200 Nassau Street. Dave?
Yeah, this is a corner lot. So there's two front yards. They have a small dog that they want to just kind of keep corralled. He doesn't tend to leave the property, but they already have a fence in the backyard of this property, a privacy fence. And they're looking to put picket style fence in the white area on the drawing there.
And Dave, the owner is here, correct? If there's any
Yeah.
questions?
If there's any questions.
And if there are any questions, if anybody's gonna speak, please come up to the mic or the table so we can hear you on the microphone. That'd be great.
Is there any gates?
No,
Gates required.
pardon, there's no gates.
Are gates required under the ordinance?
No, I don't believe so. You could still access both entrances outside the fence area, either up the driveway or on the sidewalk there on Nassau Street.
Just for reference, as we always talk about, how does this and why doesn't this align with our ordinance? And why are we having this to come to us instead of you just being able to approve it?
While we address the new zoning ordinance, that'll be addressed.
Okay, I
Whether or not
understand
to
that.
have it in this venue or
Yeah.
not, so.
So, but
As-
what doesn't this, why doesn't this fit?
Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but any front yard fencing
Oh.
situation
Okay.
needs approval by planning commission. So
Got
it's designed that way right now.
Okay,
That's something we'll address. There's zoning change.
perfect. That's the only thing that I wanted to make sure or have clarification as to why, and so that we address it also, so,
Currently, it's not a variance, anything like that. It's
Okay.
just
okay,
process is in the ordinance that as the process right now.
great, thank you.
You said the white area is gonna be where the fence is. No,
Correct.
the one to that side of that picture is at the house.
To the left is the house. yeah.
Okay,
The others are.
does the utilities have access with a gate to get to the meter?
There will be an area where that white patio is below the left side of the fence there. There will be an opening into it that'll allow you into that yard.
In other words, it'd be a gate to get into the yard.
Just from that patio, yes.
Because we should do it so the utilities got easy access to read your meters. Or if they have any trouble with it, that's the only thing I got.
Jay might know.
Sir, do you know what side the meter here is on your house? Do you know where the meter is, the electric meter is on your house?
Yes,
Do you know what side it's on?
the front,
Can you give direction up here on the map, please?
South side, north side, west side,
west side,
west side. So it's over here.
yes.
Are they read electronically now? Yeah, we don't have.
So there's no they don't need access to the meter,
Unless there's a problem.
but to read the meters, they don't.
If we have to access the meter socket, if the meter would malfunction or something, it would be nice to have access to it. Yeah, because we don't need permission to access our equipment.
There's access around both sides of that fence going into that front yard.
I'll ask the same question I always do. Fire department feels safe with that?
As long as it's a wood fence. I don't like the wire ones. Because you always got the chance with a wire fence that you get stray voltage to the fence and it don't feel good.
Yeah, this is a picket style fence that they're proposing.
And utilities, that's your concern is getting to the meter socket?
That's my only concern, yep, would have that being able to have access to our equipment.
And we do have access, correct, Mr. Vincent?
Mr. Sanderquist? Can they get to the meter around the fence that you're proposing?
To look at
Will they
what,
be able to get to the meter on the house,
the gas or the water?
The electric meter.
the electric?
Oh,
meter?
yeah. If they have to do any digging inside there, 4 screws take the fence down.
There won't be an access.
Yeah,
We may have to provide an access for them to get in there with a gate.
well, they don't come and read the meter anymore.
Well, they might need to service something though.
Oh, yeah, but no, they can get at it.
Anybody see any other reason why we should deny it?
Just like to make sure that there's the appropriate access. I mean, I'm not real clear as to where it is and stuff, and to make sure that, you know, for the fire and everybody, that there's access. I'd like to have that be clear before we approve it.
And Mr. Vincent, you said there is access from the,
Yeah. On the right side of the house there, there's an area to enter into right there.
Okay,
And then we've been approving these right along our picket fences in the front yard, so. As we want to step away from what we've been doing right along.
I'll make that motion
I'll
to
second.
approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion was made by Mayor Herder and seconded by Donna to approve this fence at 1200 North or Nassau Street. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
hi.
All opposed? Motion's carried.
All right, the next one is also another front yard fence request at 812 Shiaxton. Basically got a new owner at this property. This has been a problem property with the city for quite a while. The new owner's gone in and cleaned the entire property up. He's more interested in having a fence to keep some of the neighborhood dogs out of his yard as opposed to keeping his in. So he's proposing a picket style fence in the area shown there in white. There'll be a gate at the front entrance to the house on that sidewalk there. And then he moved the fence back to allow him access to the garage on the Lima side street of the property. This is also picket style.
My concern again goes to the fire department and utilities.
Yeah, there will be a gate there at the sidewalk at the front that can access the house.
What about by the driveway? Is he gonna run the fence completely across the driveway and close his driveway off?
No, the garage is right there. It's all open.
Okay, I'm on the wrong corner.
The garage is on the south there. on the line of sight, the driveway's there below the white line for the fence.
I think the utilities are on that side of it as well.
Anybody see why we should not approve that? I'll make that motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion's been made by Mayor Herder, seconded by Jeff Huntsky to approve the fence at 812 Shocking Street. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's carried.
All right, next on our agenda, we have a site plan review for a mini storage facility at 1705 Hillshire Drive. If you recall, we just took action recently to allow for additional use there for storing some campers. So we're here to look at pretty much the same site plan review and to approve this to allow the owner to get started on this project. This is Hilker. Can you go to the number 7? I think.
So just to give a
No, this is
initial aerial.
This is Hilker's. We need the Hillshire Drive 1705.
Oh, wrong one. Yep. we need to go.
There we go.
This-
Yep. So we had this at the last meeting. The only thing we had to change on the site plan review is the driveway that he had configured on the last round when we were in here was larger than the ordinance currently allows. So this is a minor change we made to the last site plan we had at the other meeting. He's met all the other standards in our zoning ordinance, and the administrator is recommending approval to allow this project to go forward.
This lot.
Correct.
Any questions?
I'll make the motion to approve the site plan.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made by Donna, seconded by Susie to approve the site plan for the mini storage at 1705 Hillshire Drive. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's carried.
Now on to the Hooker Trucking Facility on Hill Street.
No.
I spoke to the owner there. He's said business is booming. He's looking to add on some additional storage buildings on his property. If you know where this is at, it's on the curve there of Cook Street and is that right? I can't see that. Fremont. So it's kind of hard to see the outline of the lighter colored roof there. But it's right there. That's the existing building. And then there's that darker area up to the left corner of that same thing is also existing. He's proposing that addition down there on the south side of that property. Can you go to one of those other, yeah. So this shows a little better where that first building's going, and then building number 2 is going to extend on the lower building there, those two up to the north. And that's going to run toward the railroad tracks there. The railroad requires a 50-foot setback. He's going to be approximately 70 to 72 feet away from that. So as far as setbacks go, the proposal for both of those buildings fall within the guidelines of our zoning ordinance. I'm recommending approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the additions on Hilker Warehousing at 406 Mill Street.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Okay, a motion's been made by me, seconded by Mayor Herder. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's carried.
Our next item on the agenda, we've had just a brief discussion in the past about this is at 310 Whoop River. It's the corner where the old pump 24, I think it was called, used to be located. The owner is proposing to place a building on that corner with retail on the first floor and then 6 apartments in the upper part of the building. We've been working with McMahon on some conceptual drawings on how this might look. He also purchased the lot, or I should say has a purchase agreement in place for this lot and the lot directly south of it. The ultimate plan would be to build another building or a couple duplexes on that south lot, but we just wanted to kind of run this by the commission to kind of see if there's any feedback or questions that we could maybe address before spend a lot of money on getting an architect and stuff involved in.
Will this face Wyman Street then?
This would face Wolf
Wolf
River.
River.
Yeah.
Wolf River.
It actually faced both kind of because it's on the corner there, so.
You may have said this, but I didn't hear you. How many apartments are there gonna be in there?
6 is what they're proposing. So if in order that to happen, this is zone B1. On the apartments, we would have to do a conditional use grant for those to allow for multifamily. So if we thought we were gonna maybe try to move forward on this project, he would fill out the application to allow for that, so. He's here tonight if someone has questions for him. I know he's been working pretty steadily with McMahon. They've sent me a few renderings that they thought might get some interest, so.
Be a
but
nice addition on that corner
With
with
the,
the housing.
with the footprint size of that building is gonna, and if you put garages in the back, is there gonna be enough parking space?
No, not the way our current ordinance is set up. He would need to probably come up with a different plan on parking. I did look up some of the code as it relates to parking. It depends on the use of the lower, whether it's retail, office, or like a customer service, like a barber shop. Based on the square footage of that footprint is how many spaces you have to have, and then it also requires 2 spaces per unit, and then 1 space for every 4 units for like visitors. Now, in the past, depending on how, say it's all 1 bedrooms, we don't necessarily hold them to that 2 per, but the parking will be an issue that they would have to work through. We're just kind of wanting to get this in front of you folks to kind of look at to see if it's something that we thought maybe they might want to pursue.
Well, and that parking issue, it's something we're looking at when we redo the zoning, right?
Correct, and we'll address that. I'm
Yeah.
assuming we'll be a little more lenient
Right,
when it comes to
right,
parking.
right.
And then we have the option to do that now. They just have to generate a letter kind of explaining why they don't feel they need to meet that current standard, and I'm assuming they would.
Is there any contamination on that lot?
There is not. That's all been addressed. They've got a letter from the agency that handles that. They've got it all clear on that, so.
I mean, if they could meet, design a building where they got enough room for parking, I think it'd be a good thing to do. But
I think it's a very nice looking building.
Yep, the developer's here. If anybody would like to ask questions or kind of wait a little bit.
No, no.
He planned on being here tonight, so I'm surprised he's not here. So I can try and field some questions. Like I said, we're not really to the point where we're taking action on it. We're just kind of rolling things
Does
out.
he have an idea of what kind of business in the,
No,
he doesn't know?
not as far as I know.
And like Dave pointed out, and I just want to reiterate that, you know, the zoning end of this one on the north side is B1 already, which allows the retail, but you need the conditional grant for the multifamily, which that'll be on next month's agenda to actually approve the conditional, consider to approve the conditional grant. Because we have to put notices out, which we've done the notices already. We got to contact people within 100 feet of the property. And put notices in the paper. So that process has started, so we can plan on doing a public hearing next week for that.
How does this align then with our comprehensive plan? Is that part of this, or this is something that is different than that we?
Good question. So like Dave stated, there are 2 lots there. The north lot is B1 right now,
Okay,
which is the downtown business district. B1 allows the residential, or sorry, allows the commercial end of it.
Correct.
But we have to do a conditional grant for the residential. And that's lines up with the comprehensive plan future land use map. They are also asking down the road eventually that maybe mimic that on the south lot. That's there as well,
with business on the bottom,
just residential.
just residential, okay,
However, that's R2 right now.
okay.
To do more than 2 family there, we would have, and in our comp plan, it's 1 and 2 family residential. So to consider the southern lot, we would have to go through a comprehensive land use map amendment process, which you guys remember, that's a long process, you know, it's a detailed process, and then also change the zoning to do that as well. And we would have to consider whether we would want to do that as another B1 to match so that they'd be the same, or if we'd want to do that like an R4 just to allow the multifamily. I think there's a lot of discussion we got to figure out. This is just conceptual at this point in time to kind of start giving you guys a heads up what's coming down the pipe. To see if you conceptually like that, because there's obviously a lot of work that's got to be done by the developer and the city to consider this. But this would be the conceptual, some of the conceptual designs at this point in time, you know, and then this would be the south facing side of it. So if you look at here, it'd be the south facing side of it. What's that, Spring Street, Dave?
Mhm.
On there?
Yeah, Spring
Spring
Street. I
Street, so
believe.
Spring Street's here. So this south facing side conceptually would look like this. And not 4 stories. Conceptually right now, 3 stories. So we've got some work to do, but I guess at this point in time, this is something that's coming down the pipe for the commission to kind of consider.
I think it's a nice blend with the location.
Me
because
too.
we're gonna have a very large apartment building across the road. And it is a nice, maybe even buffer to the residential area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a really nice transition to have a little bit of retail, a little bit of housing, and the single family houses. So I think it's really a nice use of that land.
Aren't a lot of the homes that are around there too, aren't they like duplexes, not duplexes, but 2-story apartments, you know, so it would kind of fit into it, and I like it. I like the way it looks.
I think if they were to move forward on that second south lot there,
Right,
I think they plan on a pretty good amount of buffering between the house directly next door and the building, just to kind of give them a little
Mhm.
space there to transition to that larger
There's a
building.
very old picture.
yeah.
If they were to
Corner,
approve that second building could not be over 40 feet based on our ordinance. So that one would probably a little, not quite as tall as the corner one.
I think that house there in the corner is for sale right now. It's not.
I don't,
Oh, I think it is. I mean, it's and I think it's you know, I don't know, like upstairs,
One
downstairs.
One across the street from Wyman Street, the large white house.
Yes, that
Yeah,
is,
that's
and
the
then
one.
one across from Spring Street, I think is safe right
That
now.
one just hit the market, yeah.
Yeah.
This one?
Mhm.
Yeah, they both passed away.
Is that a single family, Jeff?
Yeah,
I
I think
believe
it
it is, yes.
Okay.
I think it'll look nice.
So the proposed building then, that would look pretty much like this, exactly like this?
I think, no, this is another building. What they kind of wanted to do is mirror some of the look that you're getting on that 98 unit, so it kind of looked a little more compatible. So this is not the exact design, but it's a pretty good rendering of what they're looking to do.
They talked about trying to mimic or complement the new big 98 unit Swiderski apartment complex, just with colors and different materials. So, I mean, in the agenda, here was one initial rendering of it. And then we've seen, this is another rendering, so
It's really a nice looking building right
It
there,
is.
the way it
It
is.
is very nice looking.
I agree.
What
I
they,
think it looks sharp on that corner.
before they spent a lot of money on architects and engineering, they kind of wanted to, I know we can't take action on it, but they kind of wanted to have some feedback. Whereas say on that south lot, it was like kind of getting a no
Mm-hmm.
or a yes to maybe move forward or not to maybe pursue a different avenue for that other lot.
From
Well,
what I'm
that-
hearing
I think
from
the corner
commission-
lot makes a lot more sense and
Mhm.
just with a little bit of, that use for the residential on
I
the
think if
top.
we're gonna consider how long those lots have been empty.
I was just gonna say
Not
that,
standing in the way for
Yeah.
future development.
right?
Well, and what we're just going to discuss doing with zoning and how we're going to be changing that could be a plus.
The south lot's gonna be a lot of work on the planning commission's part, because there's a lot of moving parts. You've gotta change the mapping and the comprehensive plan. You've gotta do a zoning amendment to change the zoning use for that. So, I mean,
but I think that's something
you
we
gotta
should,
have public hearings.
we should be digging into that more, because you're pushing more dense use. This is all 1 and 2 family residential here, so
Mhm.
you're kind of pushing a little bit more denser use into this area, so it's something we're gonna wanna chew on for a little bit, to see how we would wanna, step that down, from you've got the large Swiderski apartment complex and then, into this multi-use development idea, but then the question is, do you wanna mimic that here and get it into that, 1 and 2 family area, or even step it down a little more? Something we gotta chew on a little bit. We got time to kind of think about it, but it will be a lot, the process for the amendments do take a lot of time to do that.
I think we'll have a little time on that southern lot if we decide to pursue that. He's gonna do this in 2 stages, so his first proposal is gonna be for the north lot there.
He's really gonna have to address the parking issue if he's gonna have 2 small businesses downstairs. He's gonna have to figure that out.
Yeah, and like
Depending
you said,
on
it
what
depends on the business, some are gonna take pretty intense parking and others maybe not so much.
So like Mary Mark said, I think you're,
I was gonna ask, anybody have a no? I mean, is anybody reserved on this? So I think the commission is pretty well on board.
at least to continue.
Just let them continue.
Yeah,
If we can figure out the parking part of the footprint of the building,
So
why not?
This will be potentially on next month's agenda, so.
Any thoughts, things comes up in the middle of the night, contact Dave or I, and then we can kind of work through that as we move forward with planning and,
In the middle of the night, you want us?
well, no, you can email me in the middle of the night. Just-
Don't call Bernie.
That's what he said.
Bernie probably be out putting out a fire.
So, next on our agenda, we have a representative for Vanderwaal and Associates here to
Oh,
Kinda-
let's come up, sit up in the.
kick things off on our zoning.
And I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and Scott.
Absolutely.
All right, Scott, can you see that on your end? Is that looking well?
Looks great.
Perfect. All right, Ben.
Okay, great. Hello all. My name is Ben Rohr with Vandewall and Associates. It's a pleasure being here this evening and getting to meet you guys all in person. This is the beginning of the zoning ordinance rewrite process, and we've done a couple of upfront steps, and this is the first opportunity to meet with you guys in a long series of opportunities throughout this project, where we'll have you guys as the Plan Commission sort of guide this process in terms of, you know, some of the big issues and policy questions that we need to resolve through this process and gather your input. So it's reflected within the document, and there'll be a variety of public input opportunities as well throughout the process. So with that,
On the side, is there a button that on and off?
it's on.
Oh, come
It was just working. Well, overall, the first step this evening, wanted to start with just talking a little bit about the project, where we're headed, and then we'll dive into the memo that we had provided for you this evening. So as already mentioned, the comprehensive plan is something that you all and the city worked to create in the last year. And so that is really our guidepost for the development of the new zoning ordinance, because you guys are all familiar, what we do with our ordinances need to be in concert with what we have in our comprehensive plan. So it's a really important step that you've taken to accomplish that right away. And it will be, you know, that guide moving forward. Housing was a big component of the comprehensive plan. So we want to ensure that with the zoning ordinance that we're trying to accomplish the various goals that are identified within that plan in relationship to housing, in addition to, you know, the business growth, the job growth, the expansion, those types of opportunities that exist within the community. We want to be able to facilitate those through the zoning ordinance as well. This is a high level summary of sort of where we're headed over the next year. And so this summer, today being the first step in the discussion of the evaluation of the existing zoning ordinance, we did hold some stakeholder interviews prior to this meeting. We'll talk a little bit about that. And what we'll be doing over the summer is evaluating and developing new zoning districts. And in relationship to that, new land uses and bulk dimensional standards, so setbacks, lot sizes, those types of things that are associated with each one of those zoning districts. And this really forms the basis of the components that are necessary to write the text associated with the new zoning code. So we want to get those sort of, we're not, you know, we can still tweak them as we move forward, but we want to get those to a place where we're all comfortable. And that will be sort of the next step that we would bring forward later this summer to this group and have a discussion about. Then we'll dive into writing the text after we get that into a good place and start drafting different parts of the ordinance, reviewing those with you and having some of those policy discussions and decisions, in addition to looking at the zoning map itself as well. And what we'll transition to probably next spring is having some more of that public input opportunities, revising and refining that draft document and the text and the map, and then preparing for adoption approximately around this time next year. So it's not a quick process, but that's intentional because there's a lot to go through. There's a lot to wrap our heads around, and we want to try and get as much as we can right and reflective of, you know, resolving some of the issues that we already talked about this evening and some of the issues that are identified within this memo. So that leads me to the document that you have before you that was in your packets. The purpose of this is, again, to be a little bit high level in nature. We didn't want to dive into every single specific component, but we wanted to frame sort of where we realize there are existing issues with the existing ordinance and provide some recommendations on how we could remedy those with some solutions. And this came from a variety of different input related to the comprehensive plan, our review of the existing zoning ordinance. We sat down for a half a day with Dave and Chad and walked through the ordinance, walked through what their experience has been. And then we had a variety of stakeholder interviews with city department heads, with developers, builders, and realtors in the area, and with elected officials and committee members to gather a bunch of those issues and figure out sort of what are these big picture things that we want to address with this code and this ordinance. So the overall goal of the project, like I mentioned, we want to implement the comprehensive plan. We also want to modernize the ordinance. What I mean by that is not only as you're looking at it, it's sort of cumbersome and difficult to navigate, but we also want to modernize regulations through, you know, I think the perfect example is the project that you just saw conceptually before you. I think that if that is something that you guys want to see moving forward, that's something that the zoning code can enable in a variety of different ways and foster that type of development. And so that's what we're going to try and accomplish with the code rewrite, in addition to user friendliness in terms of providing a lot more information in diagrams, tables, charts, that type of thing. And so we have some examples here this evening that I'd like to share with you as well. So I won't, spend a ton of time on this, but the stakeholder interview sections, we had about 20 total participants. We wanted to hear what was working well, what needs improvement, and generally what's people's experience with the zoning code right now from their perspective as those individuals in the community who most frequently and most often use the code itself. What did we hear? Unsurprisingly, we heard common themes throughout each one of those sessions. And this is just a high level summary of that. In particular, improving sort of the organization and user friendliness, but the clarity in terms of some of the ambiguity that's out there right now with definitions or other provisions of the ordinance. Providing that additional housing opportunity and mixed use opportunities. It was a great job that you put the conceptual plan of that project before me today, because it's sort of reflective of the ideas that we're trying to accomplish in some respects here with the code. The site plan review process, Dave has identified some issues with that he'd like to see resolved. I know that there's others in the community who feel the same way, so we want to try and tackle that through this process. Again, the whole fence issue was well-timed in terms of coming before me today. Evaluate what can be approved at the staff level, what needs to rise to the plan commission level and the city council level in terms of where we need that type of input. And then finally, the sign ordinance is a component of the zoning code that will be addressed through this process as well. So that really tees up sort of the key issues. There's a list of those within the document with a written explanation under each one of them. I'm going to go through these rather quickly because they do sort of sound repetitive in respect to some of the things that I've already mentioned and some of the things that you're probably already aware of dealing with the code on a pretty regular basis. So we understand and we know that we're going to probably need some new zoning districts to facilitate some of that mixed use type of projects, to address some of the industrial, do we need the multitude of industrial districts? Can we reframe those in some way? Do we need additional residential districts, or do we need to combine some of those residential districts? That goes hand in hand with missing middle housing. This is a term that's often used. You're probably familiar with it. We look at the spectrum of housing from single family to larger apartment style. What's in between is often called the middle, and that's your duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, small multifamily, 6, 8, 12 units, all those types of things. Does the code enable that to happen in places throughout the community? Maybe it's not everywhere in the community, but where does that code allow that to happen? We need to think about that as we're dealing with the housing situation that we're currently in the midst of right now. Bulk dimensions, like I talked about, setbacks, lot sizes, heights, all of those things are an integral component of each of those zoning districts. The 7,200 square foot lot size that you guys have for a lot of your residential districts, I wouldn't say that that is incredibly cumbersome or large, but we can think about that a little bit further. Some of the more modern codes, we're going down to 6,000, 5,000 square feet. And what this does is a big component of the costs related to housing is land and infrastructure. And the larger lot that you have creates more infrastructure and land costs. So construction costs are something that we can't necessarily dictate, but if we can dictate some of those other facets or components and enable some of that type of development to occur, those are things we need to look at. In addition to density, there's a variety of different ways that the code, uses a floor area ratio and a unit cap and those types of things. Do we want to modernize that? Do we want to take one approach versus the other? Those are the types of questions and policy discussions that we are going to have with you over this process. That also, the housing kind of component goes with number 5 as well. In family suites, that's typically called like a mother-in-law suite or a granny flat that you're probably familiar with. We typically separate that out in our zoning codes from an accessory dwelling unit because with an in-family suite, you really can't tell from the street if that unit even exists because it might have a small kitchenette. It's probably attached, or it is attached to the structure within the structure itself, most likely. Whereas an accessory dwelling unit may be exterior to the structure, maybe over the garage or in the backyard, and may have different impacts. And so we want to think about, do we want to allow these? Where do we want to permit these? These are another type of housing unit, especially as communities across the state see a rise in an aging population. These can be alternative housing opportunities for that population to stay in the community, stay living with potentially their children or their grandchildren or whatever else it may be. So those are the types of things that we want to discuss and explore through this process as well. And then plan development. I understand that the process can be improved. And so we can provide some ideas on how we can make that improvement. We do think we're going to retain some version of a plan development zoning district to provide those opportunities for flexibilities when there is a unique situation that presents itself. But as I've found out from you guys, you don't often use that tool right now, which is okay, and it's perfectly fine. That means you're following your code, which is good. But we still want to provide you with that opportunity for a plan unit development if you need it. User friendliness, consistency, these are types of things that I'll show some diagrams as to how we are going to propose to address some of these things. Mixing of uses. This is something where, I think traditionally, and a lot of older codes that we look at, a mixed use is only permitted downtown and it's only permitted above the ground floor. And in some instances where we're talking about modern development practices and how sort of retail and commercial space has shifted over time, do we want to allow some version of residential on the ground floor in a mixed use building? Do we want to allow first floor parking? Those are the types of things that you guys have already had discussions about in relationships to some recent projects. But those are things that we can build into the code to make it more modern and reflect sort of the development that we're seeking. Exterior building design and landscape standards. I think there's ways that we can improve this from what you have in the code right now. And we have some models and ideas on how we can address that. And then we can fine tune and tweak that to best fit what you guys are looking for. But there's a variety of ways that we can handle that. Typically, the approach that we've used a lot is design standards based on the land use. So if we're talking about a multifamily, they have a certain set of standards versus a commercial or industrial type of development. And then additionally, downtown, we know that that's a unique area of the community. We want to specifically provide some attention to the downtown standards and what those look like. Performance standards. What I mean by this is, parking, access, fencing, swimming pools, some of the stuff that Dave deals with on a pretty frequent basis. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think you're all aware of that. And so I won't dwell on that factor. Parking requirements. This is something that many communities across the country have realized that some of their parking regulations in terms of their minimums are significantly higher than what they need and what the businesses need. And what this results in is large areas of pavement that are significantly underutilized for the majority of the year and are built to facilitate the 1 or 2 peak days of the year. But the other 360 days are really significantly underutilized. And so what we can do through the zoning code is explore how we could reduce some of those minimums. Some communities have put maximums. Maybe that's something you guys want to think about in terms of if a development comes in and they want 100 parking spaces, but we think they only need like 20. Do we want to allow that to happen? That's where a maximum would come into play. Same with bicycle parking. If that's something that you guys want to be included in new commercial development or multifamily development, those are the types of standards we could build into the code as well. There's been a variety of state and federal law changes over the last decade. I think some of them have been addressed within your code, but I think one key goal of this process is let's understand what all of those changes are. Let's make our code compliant starting at the day of adoption. We know that these laws will change again over time, but if we can aim for being perfectly compliant at the end of this process, that's a win in our book and improvement from where you are today. Conditional uses sort of go hand in hand with that. Act 67, I think that was about 8 years ago now, really reduced the ability for a city to have a lot of deniability in this sense in terms of looking at conditional uses. Basically what it says is if the conditional use meets the standards of the ordinance, you must approve it. And so that runs into some issues oftentimes where you might have a conditional use where you have a pretty strong opposition related to what that conditional use looks like. But if it comes to you with those standards met, your hands are sort of tied. And that's a difficult position for all of you to be in. And so what we'll try to do is reduce the number of conditional uses through this process. We'll address the sign code in terms of law changes, but also easier ways to use and navigate that, and then increase clarity with the definitions. So I do want to show you a couple of examples of just what I'm talking about here today. One way that we will improve sort of the overarching component of the code itself is reorganize the code into a set of different chapters or sub-chapters within the overarching municipal chapter. And what we'll do is organize the structure so it sort of flows with, if you were a person asking Dave, for example, what can I do on my lot? Well, the first thing that you would do is look up what the zoning district is. Then secondly, you'd look at what land use is permitted and the land use regulations surrounding that. After that, you'd look at the bulk standards. You'd get into the details of the performance standards. If you're proposing a fence, a new driveway, a parking lot, those types of things. If you're proposing a new structure, exterior design, landscaping, signage. And then the final chapter, chapter 10, will just be more of on the city side of things, administration and procedures, having that all in the document. What we aim to do in particular with chapter 10 is put a lot of information in there so you can reference it in the very off chance that you're going to need it. It will add length to the code. It is one of those things that hopefully you won't have to reference, are we doing our procedures correctly? Hopefully you're already doing that. But in a situation where someone may challenge you, we want to have it codified so you can reference that in that capacity. In addition to that, this was in your memo as well. And this sort of shows that hierarchy flow of how someone would be using the code in the future. Additionally, what I wanted to point out is that we will have the text-based standards in the code itself, but that will accompany things like diagrams, tables, charts, so that you will still have the boring, I guess, but needed text to reference in those cases. But for the vast majority of instances, you can, Dave or Chad or whoever's using the code can point to this table and say, you can find almost all of your information right here. But if you need to reference a specific component of the code, that text will still accompany it. When we're talking about missing middle housing or just housing, generally speaking, This graphic was something that we produced to try and illustrate sort of what's permitted right now and how we can think about moving forward, how we might want to tweak or change this. So on the left-hand side of the table is the existing zoning districts that allow some component of residential today. It's not all the zoning districts, obviously, but it encompasses all of the R districts and the B districts. Across the top are different types of structures in terms of residential development. Single family, you can see, is allowed in a variety of districts, two family as well. But as you scale up in terms of density, the rules change. This is not uncommon. This is a hierarchical approach that is often used. But what we do see is, for instance, an 8-unit or less, that's only permitted right now in an R3 zoning district. So where we have that map today is the only location in which that type of development is going to be permitted. And so we want to think through that. Do we want to allow that in other areas of the community? Or do we want to create another zoning district that might enable more or different combinations of residential in certain areas? I'm not anticipating, nor am I advocating for completely getting rid of an R1 single family zoning district. But I think there's other opportunities throughout the code to enhance or improve opportunities for a variety of density. And that's the types of things we want to address with the code. One thing that we'll do, and this is an example of one of those tables. So for each individual zoning district, what it will have is a table like this that specifies the amount of minimum standards that need to be met. And this is what I mean by bulk dimensional standards: lot area, green space, building coverage, lot width, front setback. All of those types of dimensional standards are very clear, very easy to interpret, very easy to read and understand. And what this will accompany is a diagram like this. And so where all of those lettered dimensions will correspond to one of those dimensional standards in the table prior. So what you would be able to do is say, all right, I'm property owner X, I want to do this. What does that standard actually mean? Because I don't use the code very often, which is a likely instance. Well, you can see that C actually means my front setback, and you can reference that via a diagram. That's a helpful explanation tool. Additionally, you guys already have this within your code, but a land use table that has all of the zoning districts across the top, the land uses along the right-hand side, and it'll be broken up: residential, mixed use, commercial, industrial, and so on. And you can see clearly what's permitted in each district, what's a conditional use, what's not permitted. And this is a really helpful tool between those two tables I just showed to basically understand almost all the rules that you need to have in relationship to when you're looking at some version of a change on your property. Additionally, on the left-hand side, I know that the text is small. I wasn't anticipating trying to read through all of this, but what I'm trying to sort of articulate to you is this is a model parking standard table that we have. The column on the left is your land use. The column in the center is the required minimum parking. This community chose to have a maximum parking, which is the second row there in the middle. And then the far right, this community also chose to have a minimum bicycle parking standard as well. And so all of that can fit in one table that's probably a page or a page and a half. And that can be a pretty easy reference for staff, for yourself, and for whoever else is using the code. On the right-hand side, this is something that we often use as well in terms of that parking dimensional standards. So when we're looking at a site plan, we need to understand that there's a variety of different ways that parking can be configured. But if we use numeric standards or metric-based standards, we can easily say, does this meet our code or does it not? And what this table and chart illustrate is, all right, what size width do we need for a minimum parking stall? What do we need for a minimum dimensional standard for the driveway access between the two parking stalls, if they're angled versus perpendicular, those types of things. And almost all of that information can be summarized in that graphic and that table right there. Again, not trying to bombard you with really small text, but what this is an example of is there will be 3 tables like this, and that will be basically your new sign code. And what this does is show all of the graphical examples of what those signs are on the right. On the left column is the type of sign, and then all of the different rules and regulations and how we measure, is lighting allowed, is this configuration allowed, all of those types of things are built into this table. And so while it does look, kind of overbearing right now, once you kind of get the hang of it, you look at it, and especially when you use it in an example scenario, it's pretty easy to just find the sign, go across, look at the different regulatory components of it, and have it all summarized here. Now, there will be text associated with the sign code that sort of backs up what's in these tables, but for the vast majority of the users, not only staff and other individuals in the community, they will be really oriented to use these tables in most instances. Finally, design and landscape standards. On the right is an example diagram that we'll build to illustrate if the community wants landscaping standards. These are the areas in which we'd like to see landscaping and how we'd like to see that landscaping diagram presented to us for approval. And it's very clear and it's very easy to understand. And associated with this would be sort of the standards and just an example of how those standards would apply to this configuration or this lot. On the left is 2 examples of how we could illustrate some design standards. And again, this talks about, the roof. Do we want to allow, or do we want to even regulate a flat roof versus a pitched roof? Porch configurations, our articulation in the facade, whether that's materials or stepping the facade back or stepping it forward in terms of creating that articulation. Windows, placement of, if we're talking about a mixed use, where that commercial would go. I don't anticipate as we massage these standards to fully, take everything that we have shown on the screen. But these are ideas that we're going to talk through. We're going to explore. We're going to see what's a best fit solution for you guys and really have some clear diagrams and text that illustrate what we're looking for with those design standards. So next steps, and then we'll have discussion here. Next steps wise, what we'll do is build those tables of the draft new zoning districts. Associated with that will be land uses and the bulk dimensional standards. They will look sort of cumbersome, but what we'll do is have all of the existing standards in there too, so you can compare and contrast between what we're proposing and what you have today. And this will be something that will be fine-tuned over time. But like I mentioned before, it's really the first step before we start writing the text, because everything sort of is connected to those zoning districts and those standards that we build in there today. So I will stop there. I know that was a lot of information. If you've had a chance to read through the memo, we can answer any questions either from this presentation or from the memo. But I appreciate everybody's time this evening.
Any questions, any thoughts? This is gonna be a big project, but it's definitely due. You
I
can
was
see-
impressed.
What's that?
I was impressed with
Yeah.
this because as I was going through it, it was in my mind, oh, we need that. Oh, yes, yes. Oh, good. It was just enlightening. It was like somebody turned a light bulb on finally.
Gonna make it a lot simpler for people if they wanna know something, instead of bothering Dave, they can go through the zones and find it.
Right.
Real simple.
Yep.
We had a lot of conflicting data in there, so it's gonna be nice to clean that up.
Yeah.
Get some better definitions of what's going on.
Good.
I think we can, probably with the sign ordinance, kind of, like I said, make that a little easier to understand and regulate what you want to regulate, don't regulate what you don't.
In your experience, what do most communities concentrate on the most when they spend the most time?
Yeah, I think The zoning districts are really important because they sort of set the framework for the rest of the code. So I think that is a really integral piece, in addition to sort of, the connection points to that with the land uses and the dimensional standards. I think beyond that component, I guess I should have mentioned this too, with those tables, it'll sort of seem like a theoretical exercise, because we're not actually applying it to anywhere in the community yet. So when we start putting those zoning districts on a map, then it sort of becomes real, not only for this group but also for the public in most instances, because you're like, oh, what is that? My property's proposed to be zoned this. What does that actually mean? And so I think the map in particular, and then really fine tuning those zoning districts to accomplish what we want are the two biggest pieces. There's a set of policy questions that will derive from these issues that we'll tackle throughout the code. I think being housing such a big topic that's very much come to the forefront in the last couple of years, that will be a big topic of discussion and has been in the recent codes that we've done. Some of the fine-tuned minutia we'll probably handle sort of not handle at a staff level, but we'll probably recommend something at a staff level rather than bringing it to you and saying, all of these little intricacies, do you agree or disagree with it? And having a policy discussion will foster those discussions at this body into those larger, bigger picture issues about, do we want to apply this standard in this area, or what does that standard look like versus, do we really need to get into the minutia of swimming pools, for instance, or something to that effect. So we'll try and divide and conquer, where staff will tackle some of the more intricacy type components, definitions and that kind of stuff, where they're more experienced, and leave the higher policy questions for you guys to help us tackle.
I guess Ben, reiterate a little bit or kind of comment. Obviously, this is a process. You mentioned just in your last comments about how this affects the public. The public is a stakeholder in this process.
Yes.
So during the process over the next year, if people have comments, concerns, questions, we've created a website.
Yes.
That we're going to be putting information on there that people go on the city's website. There's going to be a page on the city's website that has information. And then obviously there's going to be a draft ordinance created, and then a huge public informational process to gain input.
Yes.
Things like that. So anybody out there in the public, put it on your radar that throughout this year and after the first of the year sometime, we'll be working on getting public input with that, because it's obviously a very important process for the city. But in the meantime, is there anything else that if people have questions or stuff like that, just contact me or Dave, or any input or suggestions that you have?
Yeah, I think the website is a good tool. I think this memo could go on the website tomorrow if you wanted to. This is sort of a slow moving process just because it is so big. So if someone's checking it and then they come 3 weeks later and nothing's changed, that's just the nature of the beast with this type of project. One thing, we will be using the comp plan that you did solicit public input on to help guide this. So we aren't making stuff up from scratch in that realm of things. All of the meetings that we'll have discussions will be open to the public during those review sessions. And then, like Chad said, yeah, when we have a draft code and we have a draft map, that's where we'll have those dedicated public input sessions, because they will have something to react to rather than something that's more hypothetical in nature, that maybe would be harder to understand for the layperson.
Yep. And that's a perfect point that this will be talked about at the plan commission level for many months, and that we're open to the public. It's great to see some public here for once, kind of be involved in the process. So that's definitely an opportunity to get involved.
Yeah.
How are we going to get more public involvement in it? And I know we're saying the website and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if that's the only way that we should be putting this information out. Is there another avenue that we can take that maybe reaches more people other than just the website?
We have social media as well.
I know, I guess what I'm just thinking of older people. I mean, they just don't get, I mean, they want to be involved, and yet, you know, the social media and website is just not part of their daily life. And I think we're missing a vast knowledge of that population. You know, we're kind of eliminating them, you know, and I don't know how else we can do it. I mean, we don't have a newspaper anymore and stuff like that. I don't know what other ways we can do that.
We can provide maybe some information to the press stars to get some information out there a little bit more regionally. We're actively in the process of hopefully hiring our next video marketing producer. Maybe there's some creative ways to, you know, spur some interest and get some information out to kind of.
Yeah.
Have we ever thought of like a newsletter or anything like that that goes out? I know that is labor intensive, and another staff person and that would have to, you know, be doing that. But I'm just thinking if we can get it out to the public that they even know that we're doing this and get their input into it.
Do you think we have been starting to tap into the utility bills with getting some information out? I mean, we could put a little blurb in the utility bill with a QR code or a website that could help direct people to the landing page for all this, and then get all the information. Obviously, then you're still, you know, using the internet with web page, but
yeah, I don't know. I just I think that we are missing a group, you know, by just you know, relying on the website and social media and QR codes and all that kind of stuff. I think we're missing some people.
without being super labor intensive, you know,
Yeah.
knocking on everybody's door.
I know,
you know,
I know, I'm not that, but I'm just thinking of a newsletter or I don't know. I'm just thinking, I don't know. Maybe you have other ideas as to, do other communities just go with social media and websites, or do they have other ways of reaching people?
Yeah, I mean, we could do dedicated public events, but the same issue always sort of arises is that whatever date you pick doesn't work for a whole bunch of people, and you run into issues of attendance. And then somebody's like, well, I wasn't able to go to that meeting, so I missed the boat on whatever I wanted to, you know, provide input on. One thing we've used through towards the end of this process is in relationship to where zoning changes are proposed, doing mailings to those property owners in which there is a proposed change. So we can answer their question prior to getting towards the public hearing and, you know, later recommendation phases. So that's something that we can do. But that wouldn't be to every single property owner like the utility bills would be. One thing that's just challenging with the zoning code is that most people don't necessarily understand what a zoning code is, let alone what the rules are today and why we're proposing to change them one way or the other. And so it's really difficult to wrap their head around, okay, I don't care if you allow a 6-foot fence or a 4-foot fence. Maybe that's a bad example because a lot of people have fences, but I don't care if the facade is 50% brick versus allowing it to be metal. You know, those types of things, or the lot sizes, for example, you know, and some of those things are just, they're difficult to have in a public space outside of spending a good amount of time educating people as to what the existing standards even are. And I'm not saying that we can't do that. I'm just saying those are some of the difficulties I've run into in the past.
Something to chew on, see how we can.
And I think that, I mean, I know it doesn't get at your exact point, but the video production thing, I've had a lot of success in recent projects outside of zoning codes, but other plans that I worked on where video summaries that are 5 minutes that just live online somewhere where somebody, if all they have is 5 minutes to understand what's going on, that's a really helpful tool. And I found that to be very helpful for people. And so if there's ways that we can integrate that throughout this process, I know it doesn't solve all of your problems, but I think that it's a strong suggestion.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. And it's good to see you all, and we'll be back in later this summer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Senior.
The people for that building on the corner where pump 24 was here. You guys want to open it up to ask them any questions?
They did
They're
not.
here now.
Ben was here. Okay, wonderful. So Ben and his crew is one proposing the multi-use facility at the corner of Wolf River and Wyman. So Ben, did you want to come up? There's a microphone.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer questions. Or try to.
We did discuss parking a little bit. That might be an issue we have to work through, but maybe talk about probably more the southern lot. I think the northern lot seemed to be a pretty good consensus that I think we should move forward with.
Okay. In the southern lot, is that the one? That's not the one on Wolf River Ave, right?
No, that's the other one on Spring. So there might be some questions, so I thought I'd give you the opportunity to speak about them.
Yeah, working with McMahon, they had kind of tried to fit with what we had wanted for a vision. We were looking for the first floor commercial space on right on Wolf River Ave there, with some residential units over the top, and then understanding that the southern lot or the back lot, there's going to be some different requirements for height of the building and stuff like that. We brought it down to just a 3-story building. And I think according to the folks at McMahon, they said that would fall under the 40-foot maximum that there is. So as far as parking, I know some of that can be adjusted. This was just the first sort of rendering idea of what they thought would fit good and look good on the site. You know, we'd be more than happy to work with you guys if there's any, you know, if we need to add a couple more parking spaces or anything like that. I know that I think the only thing that's not on there that I had talked about with them is for trash pickup. We had kind of planned to build a little enclosure for the dumpsters at the end of each row there, so that the truck, right, kind of along that edge, pull in, pick it up, and then drive out. Try to keep things easy that way, but I know there were a couple other ideas that they had shown me that I don't have yet, that show the building sitting slightly differently and a couple of additional parking spaces if we do need it, stuff like that. So.
I think the overall feel from the commission was in support.
Okay. That's good news. I guess one question that we would have would be just the next steps. I know there's like a public hearing that would happen for some, for the conditional use permit, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so the northern lot is zone B1 right now, which allows the retail by right, but for the multifamily side of it, the conditional grant has to go through that process for the planning commission to consider and approve.
Sure.
Then the southern lot, like we talked about, is currently zoned R2, which would allow by right either single family or duplex 2-family use in that. So if we move forward with the process like this to put a 6-plex there, we have a process to go through to change the land use map in our comprehensive plan, and then also the zoning to allow that type of activity. And one of the things we kind of talked about is just we need to make some conscious effort to, you know, putting a multi-use, multifamily facility here on the, you know, business corridor of Wolf River Avenue, you know, does make sense. But once you start getting into a little bit more of a denser use into the R2 area, I think we just got to make sure that we're consciously thinking about that and make sure that makes sense. Moving in here, not saying that it's, you know, anybody's for or against it right now, but we just gotta make sure that we're overturning all the rocks and make sure that does make sense getting in here. And for us, we need to determine, because this is B1 up here on this corner of Wolf River and Wyman, do we make this a B1? Now you're pushing B1 into the residential, or do we consider that to be more of an R4 type situation, just to allow the multifamily? Because if we make this B1 and mimic, you know, because the structures and the developments are pretty much the same. If we did B1 here, hypothetically, if it burns to the ground, then a new person comes in here by right, that's retail, that's B1. So someone else could come in there by right and just automatically throw in, you know, a retail situation without multifamily type in there. So we just got to make sure we're thinking those thoughts through as we move forward. But like Mayor Mark said, I think the consensus was, yeah, they're nodding their head that this is attractive at this point.
Does it
So I
make,
think, sorry, go ahead.
does it make sense, or is it possible to combine them two properties into one tax parcel? Does that help or hurt anything?
We've talked about that, and that makes sense, but if you do that, then the best way would be that both parcels are the same zone. Because hypothetically, and we do have a couple areas in the city that have one parcel and it's split zoning in a parcel. That's not ideal. You know, so in that case, if we would look at a scenario that you want to combine that all into one parcel, then yeah, we would want to make sure that the zoning matches that whole parcel.
How many square feet would the two retail spaces on the first building be?
It would be, if it's one retail space, it would be about 2,600. Two would be 1,200.
And is parking allowed on Wolf River Avenue right there in front of the building then? Or?
That's another thing Dave and I talked about today, just to make sure that that makes sense as well. There's no restrictions except, you know, the corner, you gotta stay so far from the corner, so far from the intersection. So one thing I asked Dave is that if McMahon could look at like this scenario and mark what stalls would be in here. So we get an idea of how many stalls could fit here based on setbacks from the corners and setbacks from the driveway. So that'd be another little nugget for us to see how many more stalls would fit in here. But it is allowed right now. Plus you've got all this stretch right across the road. So.
And it all depends upon how busy the retail space would be. You know, insurance agencies would be less.
Correct.
Maybe a clothing boutique is more. I don't know.
Yep. Do you have any idea? That was one question. Any idea of what type of retail or commercial space you'd be targeting? Is it more, you know, like Jeff was talking about, insurance would have less people coming in than, you know, boutique or hairdresser. Any kind of thoughts?
We don't have any real targets, I guess, as far as the business to go in there. I know like coffee shops and stuff were discussed, but not with any real. It's just kind of an idea. Be open to whatever, and also whatever would make sense. If it would make more sense to have 2 units, be open to that, or if it would make more sense to just have one.
I do have concerns though about Wolf River Avenue and parking on that avenue. I mean, I'm thinking of the big apartment building across the street, and we had talked about maybe making the requirement of parking, you know, not as much. And so my fear is that the people that are renting in that bigger apartment building would be parking on the road, would be parking on some of the side streets, you know, around there or something. I don't know. I you know, that's my, I guess I don't want to encourage that. I mean, to have parking on the road is what, especially the Wolf River Avenue, it's busy and, I don't know. I mean, the vet clinic doesn't have parking in front of their place. I mean, they do have a parking lot. I realize that, but I'm just thinking it's pretty narrow there, and to have parking on both sides, that would be.
I think you're just not used to it because there's nobody utilizing parking on the street.
Probably, I just,
Cause you know, by the post office, they park there. And
they do, I know, but now isn't it, we just eliminated that parking like in front of what used to be John's Bar, right? I mean, that is no parking there now, right? Or, yeah,
because the teachers.
Just for the construction, I think,
Well-
That's just for the construction,
that's for the construction that they.
oh, okay,
because everything has. come
Trucks
from
couldn't make
Woodward.
turn.
okay.
Trucks
I
couldn't
just,
make
I don't
turn.
know, I just don't think we should encourage it.
I would put it out there that our new main street is gonna be even narrower and probably busier once that gets completed as compared to Wolf River Avenue, so I don't think that on-street parking is gonna be that big of a deal. Maybe because it's less populated or less people on the sidewalks and there, people maybe tend to drive a little bit faster, but that might be a concern, but I don't think that's really an issue of on-street parking there.
That's a truck route. I don't think cars should park on the truck route.
All things to think about in the next month.
I mean, obviously, as a commission, we have authority to limit parking if we see fit. We're talking about a problem that hasn't occurred yet,
Right,
you know,
right,
I think allow it and see if it becomes a problem and then, you know, you can always close that off.
And that would be something, actually, the Board of Public Works
Yeah.
would regulate no parking in those areas. That'd be potentially a recommendation from this body to them, if it got to that point, you know.
I don't think you park in front of that automotive. They pull off, you know, like Jay says, we're just not used to
probably not, yeah.
people parking there in that area. And when you do that overview and you see what the homes on Spring Street have for backyards, you know, I don't think we'd be creating much of a raise that.
And one point to that, once you start
Yeah.
parking there, it actually mirrors the roadway and that counts traffic too.
Yeah.
If it's wide open,
Yep.
people feel like it's a runway and they can go.
Right.
Whereas if you got more activity, more traffic, oh, I need to slow down.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yep.
That's why, you know, a lot of residential areas, you're decreasing the road width to calm the traffic.
No, I was referring back to the zoning and, you know.
Yeah.
Shouldn't get a lot of argument from people.
I look forward to seeing the progress.
Me too.
Yeah, review for coming agenda items.
As of right now, just this proposal that we're talking about.
Okay.
It will be on the month's agenda.
Here,
We're getting a lot of calls from a lot of people, so that could change very quickly, but as it stands right now, that's the only item we have.
all right, review for next meeting date is, tentatively June 27th. Okay, if we have nothing else, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Also move,
Second it,
Motion's been made by Donna, seconded by Susie to adjourn. At 6:39, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?